Welcome to the Legislator of the Week, a program that is showcasing to you activities of the legislators at the National Assembly. It is actually a program that is analyzing issues relating to bills, motions, and matters of urgent public importance. I am Abdullahi Aminu. In our today's program, I have a guest who happened to be a lawyer by profession. He was a justice and attorney general in his state, where he serves as the deputy governor of that state for 2 governors. I'm actually talking about an alumni of the Oxford University, London. He is currently Senator representing Jigawa Northeast Senatorial District by the name Senator Ibrahim Hassan Hadeja. You are welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
I want to kickstart the program by asking our distinguished senator a question that has been lingering in the minds of Nigerians. Being a lawyer by profession, people are curious of a reason for you to switch into politics. Can you explain this?
My foray into politics, I think, I wouldn't say it was accidental, but it started in 1999. I'm a lawyer by profession, but I chose banking as a career. And I was a banker in Lagos, investment banker in Lagos, when the then Governor Senator Ibrahim won the election in 1999, and then set about putting up a team that would help him govern the state. And I still have no idea why, because I think before the elections I haven't seen him in almost 6 or 7 years. So I still wonder why he insisted that I had to come and join his cabinet. In 99, I just moved to Lagos to take up another responsibility in the bank. And he insisted, and in fact it took him almost 6 months to form a cabinet until he was certain that he got the people that he wanted. He convinced me after several meetings, and so I joined his cabinet as a political appointee. I was not really a politician per se. I didn't participate in the campaigns. I didn't participate in the transition in 1999. But as God would have it, I found myself being the Attorney General, a position I held for, I think, less than a year, when I was promoted to Secretary to the State Government. And then while I was Secretary to the State Government, we had a political issue where the Deputy Governor resigned. And so I was appointed Deputy Governor to serve out the term, I think about 2 years, and then contested in 2003 with Senator Ibrahim to continue as Deputy Governor. So technically I only joined active politics in 2003. The rest of the period I want to refer to it as a period where I was a political appointee, and we came on board as technocrats. So I wasn't the only one. We came as technocrats, and so we're not really involved in politics at that level. It was only in 2003 I contested. We won. I served out that term, and then I had more or less a holiday till the formation. I still remain in the ANPP. I was active. When the government of the day moved to PDP, we remained behind. And so when the APC was formed, I was one of the few prominent people left in ANPP at the Jigawa state level. We came on board from the APC. And then in 2015, we had the amalgamation and the formation of the APC. I was founding member of the APC from Jigawa. I was a member of the Board of Trustees representing Jigawa State in the ANPP then. And I also participated in the formation process of the APC. We went to the primary elections. We supported then Governor Badaru, who was vying for the governorship, 1 or 2 people. Along the line, based on consultations, and when they couldn't agree, about 11 candidates could not agree between themselves who would be a consensus candidate. I was picked as a consensus gubernatorial candidate in 2015. So I was actually the candidate for about 3 days when one or two of the candidates who were part of the agreement now decided that they wanted primary elections, which I opted out of, because I had no intention of contesting. I was part of the team that was managing it, and I was just drafted into the race. So eventually, when Badr Abakar became the governorship candidate, he now insisted that I had to come on board as a deputy governor.
Distinguished Senator, going by your explanation, you are actually an accidental politician.
Well, I would say I accidentally found myself in the political situation. But like I said, when you contest for an office, even as a running mate, you wouldn't call yourself accidental.
So now you are a full politician in the country. So if you are a full politician, let me put a question that I want you to tell me based on what you think it is the answer of the question. Let's assume that all legal practitioners in the country will transform into being politicians. Are you not seeing it as a threat to this notable profession and indeed the entire legal system of Nigeria as a nation?
No, I don't think so. When I became a lawyer, when I was called to the bar, we had one law school in Nigeria, in Lagos. Now we have, we're working towards 10 law school campuses. And the number of lawyers that are being churned out every year, is probably 20 to 30 times more than that. So it's not that we have a shortage of lawyers, so to speak. And I think lawyers generally make good politicians. First of all, a lawyer is all-rounded. There's no lawyer that only limits himself to his subject. Lawyers, by practice of their profession, have to almost dabble into almost every aspect of life. A lawyer has to be an economist. A lawyer sometimes even has to be a doctor. He has to be an accountant based on the kind of cases that and the lawyer is well versed in the law. Politics is all about rule of law. It's all about separation of powers. So if you have a lawyer, whether in the executive position, whether in the legislative part, where they even hold greater sway, you find that they generally tend to do very well in politics by their training or disposition. So I don't think lawyers moving into politics is going to create a shortage of lawyers. Like I said, looking at how many lawyers we now have coming into the system every year, the profession is protected. Don't worry about that.
So let me go on a lighter mode. There was a saying, or there is a saying that jacks of all trade is a master of none. Are you trying to tell me the lawyer is a generalist?
No, the lawyer is not a jack of all trades. Lawyers are called learned, not because they learn the law, but because by their very dispensation, they have to learn a bit about everything. Because if you restrict yourself to law, then you might find yourself out of place when you are asked to defend a case that involves accounting, that involves shipping, that involves the medical field, that involves politics at the tribunals. Lawyers are out there, winning cases at the tribunals for their clients every day. So it's not a question of jack of all trades. Lawyers are called learned people because law is a continuous process. Every lawyer watches his salt. If you go and check his library, you will not find a library. And I'm not talking of law books. I'm talking of generally books on everything. Today, if I'm called upon to work on a case where my client is a doctor, I may have to read some basics about medicine. So that when I go to court, I'm talking from a position of strength. I'm talking from an informed perspective, not just as a lawyer. So, I don't believe that you can say that a lawyer is a master of none. Lawyers are masters of everything.
Distinguished Senator, as a successful politician in the country who has now happened to be part of the highest legislative chamber of the Senate, You happen to also become a deputy governor of 2 governors of Jigawa State, as I mentioned earlier. What have you found as a difference between the 2 arms of governors?
Remarkably different. The executive arm is more about implementation. Your government has a policy, you have broad-based objectives, and then all you are doing is ensuring that your civil service is working as a team to implement those policies and achieve those objectives. On the legislative side, it's not so much about, more like about formulating the policy through the legislative process. You are not so much involved in the actual execution of the policy itself. Certainly, you also have a responsibility to ensure that those policies are implemented through oversight. So I found really the legislative aspect a bit more challenging than the executive. It's relatively straightforward. When you go to the legislative side, because I also was a bit ignorant about some of the aspects of the legislative arm of government. People see the Senate and the House of Reps really from the chamber perspective. In that red chamber, you rise up and talk, motions, whatever. I found out that that relatively, for me, as a senator, that takes up less than 5% of what I'm expected to do in the Senate. What goes on behind the scenes goes much deeper. You're talking about the budget. You pass the budget every year. That's the most important piece of legislation in the country, because that is what gives rise to implementation. You have to authorize every kobo that is spent by government. Not only must you pass the budget, you now have to ensure that what you pass is what is being implemented, which is where oversight comes in. You are in various committees, you have various agencies under your committees. You have to set out and ensure that they are doing exactly what you are budgeted for. There's no misappropriation, there's no diversion of funds. I am the deputy chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. That Public Accounts Committee is the only committee mentioned in the Constitution. So a Senate can run with only one committee, the Public Accounts Committee. You don't have to, but it can run without the Public Accounts Committee. And because it's been saddled with responsibility that is constitutional, and the fact that you are more or less being reported to by the Auditor General, it is work that is Monday to Friday. The Senate sits for 3 days a week. When COVID came, it came back to 2 days a week. The Public Accounts Committee sits for 7 days a week. Not 7 days, 5 days a week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If you have sitting, immediately we finish by 12. You move to hearing room 3, and then you start the process of grilling agencies that have been indicted in the Auditor General's report. One report comes in 3-4 volumes. One volume could be 900 pages. On the average, in the last 4 years, we sat down with over 280 agencies every single year. So, I guess it depends on where you are. I found it more challenging. The work I put in the last 3.5 years, I've never put in as a deputy governor. So it was very revealing, even for me that is a lawyer. By the time I actually went in there and put myself into what was supposed to be done, I realized that most people who think senators work very little and get paid a lot really don't understand how legislation works.
You are talking about the volume of work that is surrounding legislative engagement.
Yeah.
Was it not the reason that has led to the provision of aides, committee clerks, and secretariat?
Yeah.
They are supposed to be relieving you and your work.
Well, they do their bit. We have committee clerks, you have legislative aides, but don't forget, I spoke to you about one committee where I'm expected to work for maybe 5-6 hours a day, Monday through Friday. I'm also in 9 other committees as a member. I'm in another committee as a vice chairman, Committee on Environment. So imagine juggling more or less a 9-to-5 schedule with being a member of 6 or 7 other committees. You might have 3-4 committee meetings in a day. And sometimes you literally have to divide yourself in 2. Spend a few minutes here, move here, or beg to have these committees scheduled. I was co-opted into 2 other committees, apart from this 9. My colleagues felt that I had something to contribute to our committee. So end up in 11 committees. There's no amount of clerks or legislative aides that would reduce that burden to a level where you think that you don't have much to do.
That is actually a huge tax, distinguished Senator, but there must be a lesson to learn in all ramifications of life. What are then the lessons learned about the country's legislative process as a senator?
What I've learned is that it's easier said than done. Legislative process, you have people who I call motion counters or bill counters. Every once in a while, you say that they rank legislators was based on the number of bills that they have sponsored. Some have sponsored 60 bills, some have sponsored 35 bills, some have sponsored 5 bills. What people don't realize is that sponsoring a bill, if I want to sponsor 1 bill every day for every legislature, I can do it. There's a process to these bills. You have the first reading, which is what is being counted by most of our journalists, as sponsoring a bill. That first reading is simply for you to put the name of the bill, hand it over to relevant commission, and they give you a number, and they announce that you have sponsored a bill. 95%, in fact, more than 95% of bills die at that first reading stage. You have to go to the next stage, which is the second reading, where it's debated. You prepare a debate, you debate it on the floor of the House, and your colleagues either kill or allow that bill to pass at that stage. Then you get to the public hearing, call for public commentary on that bill. You have a public hearing, people give written memoranda, and so on and so forth. Then you move to the third stage, which is the third reading, where you go to the clause by clause of that bill. If it is passed, then it's sent to the president for assent. Out of 500 bills, he might assent to 10. So the process of legislation is not what is portrayed out there, by listing out the fact that somebody has sponsored 25 bills that have gone past through the first reading. Of the 25, how many have made it through the various stages? Some will not pass stage 2 to be shut down. Some might get to stage 3 and it will clash with another bill, and you can get to stage 4. And don't forget, because of the fact that especially since we had COVID, legislative days were reduced. We're sitting twice a week. How many bills can naturally get on the order paper? It is a battle. I had a bill for first reading that I have been pushing since for the last 3 months. It just appeared on the order paper about 3 days ago. The third and fourth reading, they are in the queue with only about 3 or 4 weeks to go. They have been in the queue for the last 3, 4, 5 months. So it's very competitive. And then, of course, have the harmonization. A bill that is going to scale through has to be harmonized by both houses. You might have a bill that goes through all the 3 stages and then you have a problem at the House of Reps because somebody has a similar bill. So, it's very, very enlightening to actually go in there and see how the process works. It's not as easy as people think. And sometimes I laugh when I see people being hailed for sponsoring X amount of bills, X amount of motion. Like I said, even if you sponsor a motion every day or you rise up to speak every day, that to me, as a senator in my committees I'm serving, it's less than 5% of what I do as a legislator on a daily basis.
Before we have gone through your bills and motions, let me ask you, in your own words, what do you think needs to be done in order to make the country's legislative process more vibrant?
First of all, I think we need voter education. Our people, our voters need to be enlightened on not just the legislative process, but the difference between a senator and a governor, and a member of the House of Assembly. Most people, especially from my constituency, don't understand that there's any difference. As long as they put their thumb and vote for you, they're expecting certain things from you. And so the mistake they do is that they take what is not necessarily your responsibility and place it on you. We want roads, we want this. I can't do roads. The only thing I can do is probably influence the insertion of a road in the budgetary process. If I do that, I don't have control over whether it is funded or not. So that's the first thing we do, voter education. Voters should know what a legislator is going out to do. You are representing them as a constituency. You are there to ensure that everything that should come to that constituency does so. I'll give you an example. in the course of our budgetary process, I always insist on agencies bringing their nominal roll, list of employees, date that they were employed local government. And I, found out that my state is being heavily discriminated against in terms of employment. We sat down with the ministry. Out of 6-7 agencies, we went through over 6,000 staff. There was not a single person from Jigawa State. For me, that is an area of concern. That is more important than the budgetary process itself. So my colleagues think I'm wasting their time, but ideally, that is, I believe, what I should focus on. Because if I should bring that to the forefront and try to get some balance, then of course I probably have done something that is much more important to my people than sponsoring bills, 200, 300 bills that will get stuck at the first or second reading. So I think that is important. And again, let them also understand that based on the ranking system in the legislature, you are better off with a legislator who has been there for 2 or 3 terms, in terms of his influence within the legislature, than changing senators and House of Reps every year. Look at the turnover for this, for the 10th Senate. It's incredible. 70%, between 60 to 70% of the legislators are not coming back. So you are having a fresh set of legislators. You have lost a bunch of experienced legislators, some with 3, 4, 5 terms, and they have taken that institutional memory away, which you have to instill. And if you are a new senator, you can't vie for, a senior position, you can't vie for a leadership position in the Senate. Those are the rules. You have to have been a legislator before. And the higher you are ranked, the American system, a ranking senator in America gets his first choice of Bush committee to even serve. And in America, the voters are aware that if you have a senator who has been there for 12 years, chances are he's going to bring more development to you. So if because he has a scandal, they catch him with somebody's wife, there's a lot of noise. But when it comes to voting, they forget that and forgive him. That is his personal issue. Let me vote for him, because I know if I vote for somebody fresh out of the bag, he's going there and in 2 years he's still finding his feet, before he even begins to make an impact back home.
Distinguished senators, you are talking about the constituents. I'll now remember to go back to your senatorial district, which is of course Jigawa Northeast. What were you able to find out as the immediate issues of need that require possible legislative action before you even came into the National Assembly?
It's pretty obvious. What is needed is, address the issues that are prevailing in my senatorial at that point in time. First thing I identified, because you can have 20 different issues. If you say you are going to do 20 issues at the Senate in 4 years, you'll probably end up doing none. I took, I think, about 3 and focused on them. Girl education, we had a very serious problem with female girl child dropout from primary to secondary school. We have primary schools within close proximity of most of the communities. So essentially, but most of the secondary schools have been deboarded. Very few boarding secondary schools, they are all day, and they are far and few within. So you find a girl has finished primary 6, her primary school is next door to her house, but the secondary school that she's going to is 11 kilometers away. She has to walk. So you find that you have a very sharp drop in girl enrollment from that time. That was one area I identified. I tried to work on it through legislation and through intervention. We introduced a right to school program where we mapped out all the girls in that senatorial district. Anybody going to more than 2-3 kilometers to school, up to 12. And then we started with the furthest and started providing them with free bicycles, that will enable. It's called an EduKK scheme. And that has a tremendous impact, because we ran it about 3 or 4 times. We introduced some kind of competitiveness among the schools. We introduced, an inter-school quiz program that was supposed to reward brilliance, and we are moving to the second stage now, which I'll definitely have before I leave, that will also involve teachers. Second thing I noticed was the fact that to bridge the gap, we had an issue about the digital divide. The internet access was almost, impossible. You don't have 3G, not even 4G or 5G connectivity in most areas. It's only available in places where the telcos think they can make their money back. So big towns, if there's a university, they go and put it in campus. So I wanted to have a situation where I level the playing field. Most exams have gone computer-based now, whether it's JAM, whether it's GC or whatever. Most employment into federal parastatals is also online. And our people who are being left out. Most of the programs you see, SIP, Npower, they're all online. So I went out, within the first 6 months, we set up ICT centers in 10 localities. We have eight local governments. All the 8 local government headquarters and 2 additional ones. Now we have permanent ICT centers, which I sponsored or influenced through most of the agencies. And we found that there was a quantum leap in the number of people. I'll tell you one local government, Kaugama, that registered at one point in time for employment about 36 candidates. By the time we introduced the ICT center, it jumped up to 860. So you had 800 people who were qualified, but they couldn't venture to the nearest town to get internet access. We had those centers well run. I've been running them for the last 4 years with internet access, with power, with generators, and they're providing a myriad of services, whether it's identity card, whether it's registering for Empower, whether it's JAM stimulation. We had instances where brilliant students who in a written exam would probably get 99 out of 100, but they go to JAM and they are looking at a computer for the first time in their life. That shock, initial shock, some of them end up, not even being able to go to the first registration. We have JAM simulation software in all these ICT centers, where you have people going there to run a simulation of the actual JAM exam. So by the time they get to the real thing, it's something they are familiar with. I mean, between those two and then, of course, trying to stimulate the local economy, I had a program that targeted street lights, not street lights, solar street lights, but solar street lights in village markets. You know our daily markets, everywhere, this Kaswa is happening on Monday, Tuesday. When we light up those markets, we find that the extended trading hours actually improve the economy. Instead of closing the market by 6:30, up to 11 p.m. they're doing business. So from those 3 aspects, girl-child education, then bridging the digital divide, and then trying to stimulate the local economy by doing some markets themselves, and then lighting up most of the trading posts that we...
But Senator Hadeja, though it is part of the expectations by your constituents, it is more of your personal contribution as a senator. How do you deal with the issues identified legislatively?
There's like I told you, the most important piece of legislation for me is the appropriation bill, the budget. The budget itself is a law, and there's a process that goes through it. I cannot sit down and say I'm going to ensure that I pass 200 bills to address girl-child education. For every problem that you see there for girl-child education, there's possibly a commensurate law already in place. Our problem is not legislation. When you talk about constitutional amendment, have we tested the Constitution in its full capacity? There are some sections of the Constitution that have never been tested. So the problem is not legislation per se. When you try to do legislation, like I said, don't fall into the trap of being goaded into raising a bill for every problem that you have. Chances are it will not make it through the process. Chances are it will not make light of day. Chances are, when you come to public hearing, somebody will get up and say, there's already a bill since 1975 that's addressing this thing. Sometimes it's not a bill you need. Sometimes it's an amendment to the law to bring it up to speed. Sometimes it's not even whatever. It is to identify the legislation that addresses your problem and ensuring that it's being implemented. So if there's a clause in an agency in the Ministry of Education that's supposed to address girl-child education, that is their mandate, you go there and get the DG or ES to say, listen, I did that, I went to UBEC, and I told them this is the problem I had. It wasn't part of their core mandate, but they supported it. And because they supported it, we actually got a lot of contribution of people contributing bicycles towards this girl-child education. If I was saying, let me pass a bill that will make it mandatory for every girl to have a bicycle in Nigeria, it probably will make it. So legislation is not snake oil, like one pill that you take that will cure everything. Legislation is part of the process. Part of what I have seen time and time again is that it's not so much lack of legislation, but lack of implementing what already exists. If you can identify that and try to prod the relevant agency or ministry into getting that mandate, dusting it and implementing it, you have solved your problem. Without going to legislation is a long, I can tell you, every single day, there is not a single day that will pass that you will not see a second or third reading of a bill setting up school of this, school of health technology, school of agriculture. Everybody wants, and people, I'm sorry, people are doing that because they also want to be counted as sponsoring bills. But if you sponsor 20 of those bills and they die at the first stage, what really have you achieved?
If you are just joining us, the program you're watching is the Legislator of the Week, where we are analyzing issues relating to bills, motions, and matters of public urgent importance. I am having a lawyer by profession, a deputy governor of Jigawa State, who was also an alumni of the Oxford University, London, in the name of Senator Ibrahim Hassan Hadeja. Let's go to break and continue after this moment. You're welcome back. Distinguished Senator, let us go to your bills. I can remember you were reported one time by a national daily to have stated that, I quote, "NAS to ensure end product of NITDA 2021 bill is not controversial." Could you clarify this statement to Nigerians?
Yeah, NITDA is an agency set up by government essentially to regulate the Nigerian cyberspace. You know, it's a regulator, and a regulator always appears to be overbearing, you know, in its approach. NITDA, the NITDA bill has been in place for what, 9 or 10 years now, and when you are talking ICT in that sector, even 6 months is a very long time. Things happen very fast, and you know, what you think is cutting edge today, within 1 year it become obsolete. So NITDA is in a sector where there has to be a constant review. Okay, you can do two things. You can make it self-regulatory, which is give them the powers to be flexible in their approach, which means they'll be getting a lot of omnibus clauses, so that they don't have to come back to you all the time to have their law reviewed to meet up with changes of the times. And that's what happened. Essentially, we decided that there had been so many amendments to the NITDA bill that it is best to do a repeal and reenactment. Repeal the old law and reenact a brand new law that takes care of, you know, cogent issues, and then gives NITDA the flexibility to more or less be flexible in their approach. If you are too explicit in a law of a regulator, you'll end up in trouble. If you tell a regulator specifically go and regulate X, Y, and Z, and then along the line, if you're talking about cybercrime and you're only talking about fraud that relates to banking, for example, you will go to court and that particular clause might be restrictive. So that's why we sat down. I'm in the ICT committee. Before we actually sat down to the, we went around most of the stakeholders to ask them their concerns, because some were of the opinion that NITDA is too overbearing and it was encroaching into their own territory, you know. But it's a regulator, and that is what regulators do. So that was what I was referring to in that statement. We're trying to reduce the controversy by doing as much stakeholder engagement as possible. It took us to Lagos. We met with cybersecurity companies. We met with young people who are into cryptocurrency. We met with the NCC. These are the critical stakeholders that we felt were of the opinion that their own space was being impinged. And at the end of the day, I think the public hearing took place not barely 1 week ago. So, you know, once you have stakeholder engagement, you reduce the whatever. NITDA had to give up some of its whatever. That law was heavily amended. You know, we sat down about 3 or 4 times. Yes, you can have this, and sometimes some of the agencies are correct. you have a situation where if we had allowed a clause, then it will mean that that agency is even, legislated out of existence. So we have to give and take, and at the end of the day, come up with something that would do the work that it's supposed to do without necessarily, muscling out other agencies that are in that sector.
Distinguished Senator, I can remember there was a motion you raised that has led the Senate to mandate its banking, insurance and other financial institutions, ICT and cybercrime and capital market to invite the Central Bank and Securities Exchange Commission over the ban of cryptocurrency transaction in Nigeria by the Apex Bank.
Yeah.
What was the motive behind this motion?
Yeah.
What was the motive behind this motion?
Well, the motive was cryptocurrency is a global phenomenon. Some people understand it, some people do not. But whether I understand it or not, it was real and it was beginning to generate turnover in excess of billions of dollars. And Nigeria, I believe, is the second largest market for Bitcoin in the world. And I think central bank panicked because it was not just being used as, an investment tool, just like people do, they buy crypto, sell later. In Nigeria, it was being used as a medium of exchange. Because of the restriction that central bank had on foreign exchange, people were using crypto, gift cards and so on to settle. People were using it to bring imported containers from China. Central bank panicked, and instead of trying to understand what was happening, we woke up one day and said the central bank governor had banned cryptocurrency. And of course, everybody went into a panic. You cannot ban what you don't control, what you can't control. If you say you ban cryptocurrency, how do you ban it? What they effectively did was to ban transactions related to cryptocurrency within the banking system. And what you do in that case is that you force them to go underground. You can never stop it because you can't control it. So of course, they now started trading among themselves, peer to peer. You have crypto, I have something that you want in exchange for it, money, naira, gift card. We exchange without going to the banking system. So even the visibility that central bank saw and was being alarmed by the volume disappeared overnight. And that's what I was saying. You can't just ban something that you don't understand. Which country has woken up to ban crypto, so to speak? It's like banning something that is invisible because you cannot control it. And crypto was also serving as, a commercial escape for a lot of our young people. Yes, there's element of fraud here and there, but there's element of fraud even in regular banking. So that's why I was calling that, it's wrong. While central bank was banning crypto, the Securities and Exchange Commission was coming out with guidelines for crypto trading. Two arms of government. One is saying, yes, I think this is something that we can do business with. One is saying there's an outright ban. And don't forget, barely 3 months later, this same central bank that banned cryptocurrency now launched its own digital currency, the e-naira, which turned out to be a flop. You can take a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. That's not what people do. If get experts that understand what is happening. Get some of those young boys, appoint them as consultants, let them explain to you, and then, see how you can leverage on the phenomenon. This is what big economies are doing. As long as you can tax it, as long as it's not being inimical to larger economy, a lot of these big countries allow it to happen. It has, the bubble has burst. It has now, I wouldn't say it has died natural, but everything has now played out, and people are beginning to come back to their senses. So it's self-regulating in a way, and that was my concern. You can't just wake up and say you banned cryptocurrency in its entirety. And of course, send panic. This was the concern that we're getting from these young people when we went to visit them in Lagos. A lot of people, you will be amazed at how many thousand cryptocurrency brokers we have in Nigeria. They're making legitimate money. Is it not better for them to be doing crypto than hacking into people's accounts and taking out money?
The President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, has on one Wednesday announced the constitution of a conference committee, which you happen to be a member of that committee.
Federal Audit Bill.
What does the bill stands to provide?
A Federal Audit Bill is a bill that essentially wants to strengthen the office of the Auditor General. Truly, I'm chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, The Auditor General essentially reports to that committee because he does the audit of all federal government transactions, prepares an audit report of exceptions, and sends it to the Public Accounts Committee. And we sit down and call all the agencies that are in those volumes that I told you. That's why we have to sit every single day. So we are getting worried about the effectiveness of the Office of Auditor General. In one place, you have this guy is saddled with the responsibility of auditing a budget that is 13 trillion naira. On the other hand, he is being allocated 60 million naira to do that. Meanwhile, you are giving EFCC 20 billion, 30 billion. What is the essence? Answer, if you are fighting corruption, in countries where the corruption index is low, you will not find them doing EFCC and ICPC. You will find them with very strong institutions. You will find them with accounting systems that are robust. You will find that there's a very strong audit system whereby it's almost impossible for you to steal money. This is what we should be doing in Nigeria, not locking the stable door after the horse has bolted. If you have a very lax accounting system, it's so easy to take money, and then you set up EFCC. Somebody in this country, one individual in court now, was alleged to have stolen 104 billion naira. If you have 104 billion naira, is 5 or 6 times the budget of EFCC. With that kind of money, how do you expect to successfully prosecute that person? He will hire lawyers from all over the world. They will frustrate the system. EFCC has had cases in Nigerian courts that have been running for 15 years. So all we are saying is that that bill is strengthening the audit process. It is strengthening the Office of the Auditor General, making him more independent, making him, a target for first-line charge. If he wants money, he should get it directly without necessarily going to beg the Accountant General whose accounts he's auditing. It doesn't make good accounting sense. That is what the bill is about. It's one version in the House, it's one version in the Senate, and that harmonization committee is supposed to sit down so that if there are any differences in the two bills, we harmonize them, have one document, present it to the President for approval. Already, about 2 times a bill like that has been presented, but it has not been assented by the President. None of us know why. We don't know.
So what is then the status of this bill?
This bill is now in the last stage. By the time we do the harmonization, we are going to submit it to the President, maybe by next week. And if it is the last thing he signed before he leaves office on May 29, he would have put the anti-corruption crusade on the front burner. Because as far as I'm concerned, without, ensuring that we have proper accounting practices, without tightening the screws and making it difficult to steal government money, focusing on funding anti-corruption agencies post-action, is not really the way to go.
Distinguished Senator, another significant bill that you sponsored is that for the establishment of Nephrology and Kidney Research and Treatment Center, Hadeja, 2022 SB 385. What are the objectives behind it?
That's one of the bills that I told you I'm still waiting for it to come for third reading because of the backlog that we have both at the Health Committee and the Senate generally. That center is supposed to address an issue that is becoming endemic in Hadeja area. The number of CKD, chronic kidney disease patients that have overwhelmed Hadeja, Guru, Aminu NTA Hospital from that area is terrible. Between us and part of Yobe, as confirmed by NAFDAC, as confirmed by several research papers, including one being done now by the University of Dutse, where the prevalence in that area is about 7 to 10 times higher than normal prevalence. Some research has been instituted, and we have some preliminary reports which shows that the problem can be traced possibly to drinking water. That area has a very, very shallow water table. If you drill 2, 3, 4 meters in the Hadeja area, you get water. Their wells are very shallow. That place is also a place where this particular administration has advocated for massive rice farming. Everybody is going into rice farming. Rice farming means that almost 3 times the amount of land being cultivated in 10 years ago, it was being cultivated now 3 to 4 times. More fertilizer, more pesticides, and that I believe is finding its way into the water table. This is what the preliminary whatever. So what we just listen, let's have a kidney nephrology center that is sited in the epicenter of this endemic. I'm not saying there's no kidney disease anywhere in Nigeria, but certainly the incident in my senatorial district is 7 times more than you'll find even if you go to Kano or Kaduna. And that is the justification for attempting to site that center in Hadeja so that we can address this problem and then have a permanent research center that will go to the root of this thing and put a stop to it for the benefit of all Nigerians.
Distinguished Senator, you have other local governments under your district, Kaping Hausa, Kaugama. Why do you choose Hadeja to be the host of this center? Was it not just because it is your hometown?
No. Not, if I trace anybody in Hadeja, I will trace. If you trace 2, 3 parents and grandparents, most people in Hadeja come from within the vicinity, either from Borniwa. I can trace my roots to Malamudori or Borniwa. It's not because of that. When you have a bill, you know, when you have a bill before the Senate for an institution, there's a Senate rule that says that, you know, because of, you know, economic challenges, your bill will not succeed if the initial capital outlay is very high. So if I want to establish a school, it's safer for me to say there is already an existing school that the federal government can take over and establish that school. If I take it, Hadeja is the most heavily built local government within my vicinity. It's more or less the capital of the senatorial zone, so to speak. If you take this school, already there's a hospital there, there's a general hospital, and there is a specialist hospital being built by the state government. And with my discussion with them, they are amenable to maybe that new specialist hospital hosting this particular center. So it is for the overall success of the bill that we put it in Hadeja, because when you now go to our costing, we make a justification that you are not going to build a center from scratch. There are several facilities in Hadeja that can host this center, and it is these figures, as confirmed by NAFDAC, as confirmed by several research papers, including one being done now by the University of Dutse, where the prevalence in that area is about 7 to 10 times higher than normal prevalence. Some research has been instituted, you know, and we have some preliminary reports which shows that the problem can be traced possibly to drinking water. That area has a very, very shallow water table. If you drill 2, 3, 4 meters in the Hadeja area, you get water. Their wells are very shallow. That place is also a place where this particular administration has advocated for massive rice farming. Everybody is going into rice farming. Rice farming means that almost 3 times the amount of land being cultivated in 10 years ago, it was being cultivated now 3 to 4 times. More fertilizer, more pesticides, you know, and that, I believe, is finding its way into the water table. This is what the preliminary, whatever. So what we tell them, listen, let's have a kidney nephrology center that is sited in the epicenter of this endemic. I'm not saying there's no kidney disease anywhere in Nigeria, but certainly the incident in my senatorial district is 7 times more than you'll find even if you go to Kano or Kaduna. And that is the justification for attempting to site that center in Hadeja so that we can address this problem and then have a permanent research center that will go to the root of this thing and put a stop to it for the benefit of all Nigerians.
On July 14th, 2020, the Senate has urged the President Muhammadu Buhari-led administration to direct for the immediate deployment of semi-permanent platoon of soldiers to tackle banditry in Jigawa State area, which followed a motion you raised.
Yeah.
What was the situation on ground at that time which prompted you to make the request?
We had, you know, Jigawa has been very lucky in the sense that from a security perspective, most of this banditry and kidnapping, even Boko Haram, you know, to a lesser, it was surrounded by Yobe, Bauchi and Kano. But we have, you know, little to no incidents at all. The biggest issue we have in Jigawa is really a perennial issue of clashes between farmers and herdsmen. And in particular, in Guri local government, you know, it's something that comes up every year, loss of life and so on and so forth. So we got information that that these clashes are caused by not resident Fulani herdsmen, but herdsmen from other places, they call them Zamfara or something, who come from across and wreak havoc and disappear. And if you realize what is happening now, most of these incidents in Katsina, in Sokoto, in Kedan have now become hotbeds of banditry. They started from these little skirmishes. And when we saw that happening, we decided to take preemptive action by saying, okay, listen, let us put a permanent military installation in that place so that we can checkmate these visiting headsmen coming. If they have evil intentions, we don't want them to take root. And then, because we also have forests in that vicinity of Jigawa State, that was why I raised that motion with the active collaboration of the chairman of the Defense Committee, Senator Wamako, and we were advised that what we wanted required the approval of the president. So it might take another 6 or 7 months. So what we did was that we more or less tinkered with that motion and requested for a forward operating base. That's military terminology for a small unit of soldiers, maybe 12, 13, 14. And we discussed with the state government. They were provided accommodation in Guri, provided mobility, and that small group of soldiers really has been there since that motion was read on the floor 3 years ago, and they have been doing a fantastic job. Yes, you have issues here and there, but they are not as bad as they used to be, and certainly no itinerant herder has come to set up base to stay there and harass innocent citizens.
If you are just joining the program you're watching is the Legislator of the Week. We are now having a guest who happens to be a former Deputy Governor of Jigawa State and a lawyer by profession in the name of Senator Ibrahim Hassan Hadeja. Distinguished Senator, the Senate was at one Thursday plenary urged President Muhammadu Buhari to suspend the presidential directive on the removal of Dr. Nasiru Muhammad Laden Argungu as the Director General of the National Directorate for Employment, NDE, in what was called the overriding national interest, which was on your motion. For what reason the call was made?
Well, the call was made because the man was not given fair hearing. His Minister of State just wrote to the President that he wanted him removed because they had issues or they had administrative clashes in relation to, I think it was, which program was it now? One of these NDE programs. They had different issues, and the minister just felt that the man should be removed. There are processes, the man is a civil servant. There are administrative processes to follow. If the man is found wanting, at least issue him a query or something and let him answer it. If it is not satisfactorily answered, then the natural course of events should take place. But that's not the first time somebody just writes a letter. We've seen it happen in MPA. We've seen it happening. People just have access to the president. He's a DG. He doesn't have access to that level of authority. And you simply submit a letter and the man is pronounced. I don't think we didn't think it was fair to him. We didn't think due process was followed. But in any way, the motion was not adhered to by the presidency. The man still remains sacked till today. But at least we made the point that in the Nigerian setup, no matter how small, how low in the ladder you are, you should be given a fair hearing. You should be given a chance to defend yourself and make the explanation. Not simply because you have a minister who has access to the president every week, they meet at FEC. This man might not see the president for 8 years of his tenure. So that was just our point. The man was sacked unceremoniously, simply by executive fiat.
There was a time when teaming senators were expressing divergent views on airfare increase. When you, Senator Hassan Hadeja, said the price was not tenable, what was the situation like that deserves to be on the floor of the Senate?
It was, it's a chicken and egg situation. The airlines were arbitrarily increasing their fares, especially the local airlines, and they were citing a lot of issues, inflation, and then of course, by the time they explained to us the breakdown of the ticket prices we are paying, the airlines themselves get very little of the money. So if you increase your fare from 70 to 150,000, you might end up taking about 30 or 40,000 out of that money. There are so many, layers of charges, fan to night, to so many aviation agencies that are deducting from that money. when you see the breakdown of the ticket, even international tickets, so what we are saying is that instead of every day blaming the airline, maybe we should sit down and address the issue from the Ministry of Aviation perspective. Is there any way we can reduce some of those charges so that it will be less of a burden to passengers? Because we found out ultimately that the airlines, there was nothing they could do. They increase this, whatever, but the percentage they increase, their own percentage share of the total fare remains the same. And then, of course, international airlines are also complaining about their trust funds in the Central Bank of Nigeria, whereby they sell ticket in Naira, and that's supposed to be put at the CBN, and then exchanged for dollars so that they can remit it back to their home countries. It's probably hit, God knows now, almost $1 billion. It was like $700–800 million at a point in time. And some of them, Emirates till today, has refused to come to Nigeria because of that. They had like 3 flights a day. 1 flight from here, 2 flights from Lagos. And they just decided that they just couldn't go through the hassle of chasing foreign exchange remittance. So most of the problems are problems that we believe the government can address. You can sit down with the airlines and reach some kind of truce. We can't have a situation where you wake up, if you travel 3 times a week, you are going to pay 3 different fares. You go to Kano on Monday, you pay 70,000. On Wednesday, it's 110,000. This was what was happening. And we thought there was a need to really sit down with the Ministry of Aviation and the airlines and address the issue.
As a ranking senator, what do you like most about the National Assembly?
I think it's the harmony that exists between the legislators. Virtually since I resumed as a Senate 3 years ago, there has been very little partisan consideration in the decisions of the Senate. At least that's what I know. I don't know about the House of Representatives. Everything is done not based on party affiliation, but if you have a cogent national issue, it's discussed dispassionately, and I think that in a long way can be attributed to the kind of leadership we have. The Senate President has really been above board in terms of dealing with senators. There's a lot of camaraderie. If you are in a committee with fellow senators, there's nothing like you are in one party and another party. If there's an issue, you find that somebody raised an issue that might be controversial, the support might come from the other side. As an APC senator, I don't think, I need to, if there's an issue that concerns the federal government, because it doesn't mean I cannot comment on it. And I think the Senate President also gives that leverage for everybody to more or less speak his mind. So sometimes you find debates are elongated because he wants to give everybody a chance to dispassionately bear his mind on topical issues. Very cordial relationship, absolutely non-partisan in approach to national issues. We all agree that we are senators of the Federal Republic before we are senators of PDP or senator of Jigawa or senator of Ebonyi. I think for me, really, that is a very bright point in my tenure during the National Assembly.
This is where we are rounding up our this week Legislator of the Week with Senator Ibrahim Hassan Hadeja. Thank you very much for being part of the program, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
With this, I'm now saying, from myself and the entire crew, let's meet next week in same program with another guest.